Is this a gathering, David Boaz, that we're all attending this weekend, this CPAC conference in Washington? What is it a battle for the heart and soul of? I think most people here are at least registered Republicans or at one time voted Republican. There are probably very few Democrats here. But what is this a battle for?
Well, there's a conservative movement, and that's what's really organized here. The conservative movement, in theory at least, stands for Barry Goldwater's idea of a limited federal government and Ronald Reagan's idea that you want to cut taxes and you want to turn some parts of government back to the people. On the other hand, when I walked through the halls to get to your studio here, I saw an awful lot of nationalist, anti-immigration, anti-gay, pro-war stuff that I don't think fits with liberty and limited government. And that's always been the dilemma in the conservative movement.
Right. David, my personal hat is off to you. I agree with everything that you said. But these folks are here. And there is this temptation amongst conservatives to want to tell people how to live their lives. How do we fight against this temptation? I mean, Barry Goldwater wouldn't have gone for this, but George Bush, claiming to be a conservative, did and unleashed the power of the government to make it happen.
Look, a lot of these people are incorrigible. Don't waste time with them. But there's a lot of people in America that are seeking the truth. The Tea Party types, they're looking through a glass darkly. They're starting to see that what socialism has done. They're not quite seeing the civil liberties aspect of it. Those are the people we have to spend our time on, the people that are seeking to save this country from people that are incorrigible, many of whom are in the conservative movement and the liberal movement.
Should those of us in the corner of this room, Mike Church, and the many millions around the country who agree with us, become Republicans and try to get the Republican Party to nominate Barry Goldwater types, or should we form a third party which would scare the Republicans to death?
Well, George Washington didn't like parties. You know this. The founders despised parties, and because the founders were terrified, absolutely mortified of Leviathan, Mordor on the Potomac, what we have today. Political parties exacerbate this. People say, well, if we could just get the right congressman in there, they just turn the right knob this way and that way, and Republicans will get in there and they'll fix it for you. You'll see, Mr. Church. And I always say that they're the same as Democrats. They're going to do the exact same thing. The parties do serve a function, and they do satisfy their constituents, which are big government crony capitalists that need them to direct resources in their direction.
If Mike Church
Liberty Party.
If Mike Church is right, David Boaz, isn't this hopeless? Or do we have to go through the process of educating generations of people, not the people in this room? They already understand what
we already are working on the process of educating. Unfortunately, so are a lot of other people, some of whom have bad ideas. So there's a political challenge out there to have better ideas, to refine our ideas, to understand them better, and to communicate them better. But I think libertarians, and we've talked about this before, I think libertarians can get too hopeless. Their worldview is the road to serfdom, and I don't think America has been on the road to serfdom. There are a lot of areas, and your guests have talked about all of them, where government is getting bigger. But the fact is, there was a lot of micro-regulation coming out of the New Deal that we have gotten rid of. There were 90% income tax rates when I was a kid, and we don't have those anymore. There was conscription when I was 19 years old. I was worried about being drafted and sent to Vietnam. And the 19-year-olds sitting behind me are not worried about being drafted and sent to Iraq. So that's a good thing. And we have extended the promises of the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, to Jews, blacks, women, and gay people over the past generation or two, and that's an advance for freedom. Along with the Civil Rights Revolution, there have been some laws that I think were a bad idea. But letting new people into the economic and political and social mainstream was extending the rights that Thomas Jefferson tried to promise us, but didn't quite. You asked earlier, how could people who wrote all men are created equal also pass the Alien and Sedition Act? Well, how could those people hold slaves? Takes a long time to educate people sometimes.
Jacob Hornberger.
But it's not entirely hopeless, and we have not been losing every year.
That is about the most optimistic expression of freedom and the joy of life today that I have heard, and I thank you for it. But you don't agree with it, do you, Jake? You think we are less free today than we were when David was a youth, and we don't have to mention the years in history when he was a youth.
Yeah, I see it exactly opposite. I mean, I see the positive things he's talking about, But when I look at a government that has the power to round people up, jail them for the rest of their lives without a trial, deny them due process of law, assassinate them, kidnap them, and rendition them, I'm saying that is a country in which people are not free.
Does the government follow the rule of law?
Sometimes.
Where are you on the Hornberger-Bose debate? Are we freer today than we were 25 or 30 years ago? Or 10 years ago when David Bose was a youth?
First of all, Thomas Jefferson didn't promise any rights. The animating part of the Declaration of Independence, the legal part, is that these states are and of right ought to be free and independent states. It was a declaration of independence.
And it was a recognition of our natural rights.
Natural
rights that come from, as Jefferson said, our Creator. Not the Congress,
That's
our
right.
Creator.
Our Creator gives us these rights. So he wasn't promising anything. Are we freer today than we were 25 years ago or 30 years ago? I look at my daughters all the time, Judge, and I see that $464,000 little tag sitting over their head that they owe in national debt. Do you guys in this room think that you're freer than you are today? You're going to have to pay that back, especially these young people sitting behind us. This is on them. You and I get to go and retire. They got to go to work and pay it back.
Here's my frustration at trying to do something through the Republican Party. We have $14 trillion in debt right now. They added $2 trillion in debt just last week. We throw around trillions as if it were pocket change. Question: which president of the past 5 added to that more than any other? Answer: George W. Bush.
But Obama's term is young.
Question: who controlled, right. Who controlled the Congress in the years that Bush added that debt? Answer: both parties, but mainly the Republicans. Back to where we were. Is there salvation through the Republican Party? Look at these characters that are upstairs.
Well, that's
never
Tucker
mind him.
Carlson.
He works with me.
He opposed a lot of that stuff, but he's not an elected Republican. You're right. And the elected Republicans did a disastrous job, and they deserved to be defeated in 2006 and 2008. The problem is when you've got a television with only 2 channels, to give the Republicans what they deserve, you have to elect the Democrats, and there's a lot of buyer's remorse going on about that right now. A striking amount of buyer's remorse if you look at the polls. What I don't see in the Republican Party is a leader, even in the Ronald Reagan mold. And, you know, Jacob would be even more critical than I am of Ronald Reagan. But I don't see even a leader like that, somebody who believes in smaller government and freer markets. Look at the Republican presidential candidates. So I think that's a very depressing prospect.
Should the Tea Party movement form a third party? Should they co-opt the Republican Party before it co-opts them, Jacob Hornberger?
I say let 1,000 flowers bloom. You know, the ones that want to be insurgents in the Republican Party, that want to join the Ron Paul crowd, great. You want to form a third party, great. You want to go with one of the parties already there. Whatever you can do to advance liberty, let's do it.
Mike, you and I have been at these third-party gatherings. These Tea Party gatherings. Yes. I was privileged to speak at one in Fort Worth, Texas, that had 25,000 people. Walk through the crowd, and the anger is palpable. The withdrawal of consent to the federal government is obvious. The concern for the Constitution is more precise than at any time in my lifetime. Is this fire going to burn out, or is it going to keep growing?
No, it's not going to burn out. It's going to keep growing. It's like a great awakening. It's almost like being in the movie The Matrix. You know, they unplug the thing from the back of your head, and all of a sudden, wow, I can see. And people start reading the Constitution, and then they listen to Judge Napolitano or Mike Church, and they go, wait a minute. What is this enumerated powers that you speak of? Because as my friend and your friend Dr. Gussman likes to say, the purpose of a written constitution, and we can debate whether or not it's going to work like we want it to, is to limit the power of the government. Right now, this Constitution does not limit the power of this government. Nancy Pelosi, when asked, where do you get the authority to pass Pelosi care? You're such a cute little boy. It's ridiculous, Judge.
Unfortunately, what you say is true. She literally
laughed.
Looked at the reporter and said, are you serious?
Yes.
And said it 3 times. Because they know this power doesn't come from the Constitution. And they know that the courts have been complicit with this. They know that FDR's threat to pack the court resulted in the court start voting a different way. I wonder if President Obama's efforts to embarrass the court during the State of the Union address will get the court to start voting a different way. Jacob Hornberger.
I don't think so, but he was obviously hearkening back to his mentor, Franklin Roosevelt, who, as you know, Judge, engaged in his infamous and disgraceful plan to pack the court when the court was ruling against much of the New Deal.
Are we at a turning point, David Bose, or do we always think we're at a turning point? Is
We
Barack
might-
Obama so stridently trying to revive the New Deal that there will be a counter-revolution that everyone in this room will enjoy?
We might, in fact, be at a turning point. 2 years ago, all the liberal pundits said the era of Reagan is over. People don't want small government anymore. They want Obama. They want activist government. Clearly, libertarianism and free markets have failed in the financial crisis. And Obama came in on this huge wave. He only got 53% of the vote, but he had 70% approval a month later. Now he's down to 50% approval. They lost a Senate seat in Massachusetts. People are fleeing the Democratic Party, elected officials. So I think it's possible that we are at a turning point, but it requires all those Tea Partiers out there to find a consistent philosophy, to understand that getting control of spending means getting control of the spending that benefits you. It means you have to get control. You have to start cutting or privatizing things like Medicare and Social Security, which conservatives never want to talk about. That's where the money is. If you want to not have this $14 trillion deficit, you got to deal with entitlements, and they have to get serious.
Mike Church, Jacob Hornberger, David Bose, thanks very much. I'm looking at the camera because this is Strategy Room on FoxNews.com, but I'm speaking to everybody in this room, the most beautiful of whom are standing directly behind me, so it can be seen over my shoulder. In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its maximum hour of danger. This is that generation. This is that moment. Now is that time to defend freedom, because this is its maximum hour of danger. From New York, thank you for watching Freedom Watch. Stay free. Oh, we're in D.C. Stay free.